If you have an espresso machine, you probably have a vacuum breaker valve, and it is one of the most, if not the most, commonly serviced things inside an espresso machine that I come across. So I want to teach you how to service it correctly and not spend a ton of money while doing it. Quick note, vacuum breaker valves are usually found on machines with steam boilers like heat exchangers or dual boilers. If you got a single boiler, you might not see one of these. And if you are hearing a hiss that you can't explain, or your drip tray is always full, or maybe even worse, you have a bunch of water splattering under your machine or in your machine, it's probably your vacuum breaker valve. So let me show you what this little thing does. There we go. Let me show you what this thing does, why it's important, why you need to know how to work on it. Now, real quick, if you appreciate the mechanical and the espresso side of coffee, make sure to sign up in the emailer below. It's just me giving out free value every single week. About 60 seconds of content. Yeah, you should check it out. Sign up, please. This right here is known as a vacuum breaker valve. And this is also really important to know because it is also known as a vacuum breaker valve. So what in the world do these things do? It is a valve that breaks a vacuum. I know, I'm incredibly smart. But on a more serious note, let me kind of doodle out for you what we're working with. So this is our steaming hot boiler, and it is all angry and hyped up, and we're going to give it a little thumbs up. That's my thumbs up. Like it, happy with it. So it is angry and it is all pressurized, and usually either directly on top, which is this one here, or on the side, which is this one here. You're going to have one of these mechanisms. So it's happening inside here. We're going to doodle this channel in the same configuration. So here's your brass fitting, okay? And you got a pipe, and now we go up, and you do have some channel on the inside, but just assume that that's all a channel. And inside this channel, you have a open cavity with a little plunger mechanism, and it ends up sticking up. It's usually a little needle looking thing, like an upside down T, if you will. And all of that hot steam is rushing through here, acting all mad, comes up, and then it comes blowing out the sides and up past around this little breaker valve. And then this channel, as you can see, kind of goes up, over, and then it has an exit. Make sense? Now, what I didn't doodle here, that's very critically important, is the fact that you have another lip right there that the steam is still fully capable of running through. Okay, it can get around that. So you have open access all the way around this little lip that I doodled here, and then it goes through the exit. So this is how your steam would exit. But eventually, and we're only going to doodle this top half, eventually what ends up happening is you make that steam so mad that the bottom of this plunger down here catches all that steam and gets pressed all the way up into the top, and now makes a seal where the steam can no longer get through. So it was originally able to rush out the sides, like I said, and up through, but now it's coming up here and it's getting caught. And it has made a perfect seal where that steam boiler can no longer run through the top and out the side. It is no longer able to do that. Now, the way that little bit of magic happens, you got a little O-ring here on the side that makes that seal with that top valve area. Okay, so that O-ring is what's usually in charge of making sure that that seal is good, because metal on metal is not a great seal, but metal on rubber is. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that that seal is perfect. Now, why in the world would you want to do this? You're going to look down at your machine, and one thing that most people don't consider is this word. Vacuum is gnarly. Vacuum causes implosions. Now, if you have time after this video, go and look up like TikToks or YouTube shorts of whenever gas trucks forget to open up their vent, they can implode from vacuum. What's actually happening inside a steam boiler? What is all of this? It is steam, not air, steam. What happens whenever steam falls below the boiling point? it turns back into water. So if I had this fully sealed off and this boiler could not get any air inlet, once this steam turns back into water because it fell down temps whenever you turn the machine off, you now have an actual vacuum created. Your boiler is made to withstand tremendous pressures from the inside out. It is not made to withstand tremendous pressures from the outside in. Yes, there is a difference. It is a different spec and they're not as strong in that configuration. So again, your on state is this one here. This pin has gone all the way up and hit the top and made a seal. So now you actually can build steam pressure. If you have a leak, that's where that hiss is coming from. Whenever it turns off, this pin eventually will fall back down when the pressure is no longer sufficient to hold it up and allow air to come back into the boiler and disrupt the vacuum, or vacuum breaker valve. See, I wasn't just trying to be smart whenever I said it's a valve that breaks a vacuum. So let's show you the inside of this one. Okay, so this is off my GS3 and it's been hissing. I found this one likes to hiss every 3 or so months. Now, don't make fun of me too much. I very much did this incorrectly. Don't worry about that. It's okay. You don't need to laugh at me. Yeah, that's a lot of Teflon tape. I was really trying to fix a problem without the right parts. That's all right. So up here, up top here, this is that same doodling, okay? Now, realistically, for this machine, the goal is to make the seal with this little guy here. I don't know how well this is going to come through. You can see there's a little O-ring right here at the end of the hook, and that is going and sealing up in this here, and that's the whole process. And then down here, I mean, there's really nothing, okay? This is just that empty cavity, and like I said, it's got a catch down here, so this pin doesn't fall all the way through, and then that's your slide, and then this goes on top. And this is just, the whole reason for having this cap here is just so we can put a nylon or PTFE tube on the end and adjust where the dripping of that vacuum goes. Now, for a lot of machines, if not most machines, you do not have this top cap. Instead, you have this configuration, and I doodled that intentionally because this is almost exactly how they look on top of boilers. This will sit on top of your boiler, and you're going to see some little hex nut like this with a pin sticking through, and that right there is what you're looking at. The way this works is almost exactly the same, except you usually have a C-clamp, but you can see this one was old. It came off a very old machine. There is supposed to be an O-ring, and that is an O-ring, but it is so heavily corroded that it looks like it's actually part of the metal. All I need to do to service this, assuming again that you have one of these brass style valves, very traditional design, where you actually have a pin seal. I know a lot of companies are moving to ones that they claim you never have to service. I like the old design. They have a little bit more maintenance cost to them, but at the same time, you're not stranded if it breaks, where you have to buy a whole new system. You can pull them apart like I am right now and service them. So I'm going to take my O-ring pick, and this one's particularly gross, so we're going to see if I can even get this off. And this, I hope, is a testament with how much I'm struggling to don't you dare let it go this long. I apologize for the change of scenery. I'm revisiting this a few days later. It's good practice to always go ahead and do a descale on these parts whenever they're as bad as this. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. To keep all the parts in the same area, I have 3 different bins that I'm going to be dipping them into. Now, one big rule with descaling is you try to not mix and match metals where you can avoid it. And so I did this little stainless steel piece separately. And we're also not going to have the little C-clamp over here. The C-clamp will keep out because there's no need to do that. And personally, I take these little seals here and clean those by hand and not dip them in the citric acid bath. I believe you can, but that's just personal preference. So I'm going to go ahead and drop all these in, O-rings excluded, and we're going to give it a few minutes and see how they turn out. One quick caveat I forgot to make is whenever you have threads with PTFE tape, make sure you clean the PTFE off of that as much as possible. I like to use a little brass brush or other brush like that, and that just makes the job easier. But the PTFE will protect the threads from the descaler, and you won't get any solution on your threads, and that can lead to a couple little leaks here and there. All right, so I'm going to start rebuilding these valves now one at a time in order of cleanliness. I highly recommend that if you're going to be working with descaling solution in an open bath like this, absolutely wear gloves. We're going to start with this one here. I know it wasn't in the earlier part of the video. So this one came off of a newer machine, so it's a lot healthier. Over here on the right, this is actually a little bath with a small amount of baking soda, and that baking soda helps to neutralize those acids. And I'm just using some tweezers to transfer them over, and you can see that that's immediately bubbling whenever we drop it in, because a little bit of that acidic water is reacting with the baking soda. That one did quite a lot more, and it's neutralizing those acids, much like the volcano experiment that a lot of science projects do in elementary school. So anyway, now these three are nice and neutralized, and I'm going to set them down on a little rag. If you don't do the neutralization, usually you're fine, but you can have the acid you sit there and keep working for a while whenever you don't want it to. And if you have any kind of particularity about the finish of the product, then it can mess up the finish. And I'm not too worried. So you still have some tarnishing on this valve and the pins and all that. And you know, if you really wanted this to absolutely shine, what you can do is go back with a little bit of very fine steel wool and use that to polish it up. I don't care enough because this is on the inside of the machine. Now, when you're reassembling these valves, the way they work is actually quite intentional. So you're not going to be using a crush washer here on the top. Instead, you're going to be using PTFE tape. Some people say you don't have to use PTFE tape. I like to, just as added assurance. But I'm going to go ahead and snug on that O-ring once again. So the O-ring is now set on the pin. And this descale means that everything should be nice and clean for us, and we have a good mating surface. We're gonna put that pin back in, and it's all nice and shiny. And I personally like to use nicer PTFE tape. This is Blue Monster brand. I got this from, I think, just Home Depot. But once you buy a roll of nice PTFE tape, you don't want to go back. Whenever you apply PTFE, make sure you go with the direction that you'll be threading the object onto. And as a little assurance, I like to be quite generous towards the bottom. I feel like it makes a bit of a O-ring type mating surface. And then, yeah, we just twist it on. And it's snug from the PTFE, but it's also nice and smooth. Normally, I would like to get this on a vise or something, but obviously that's not much of an option in this scenario. A vise just makes life quite a lot easier than having to do dual Knipex like this, reached out underneath a camera. But just go until it's nice and snug. Because of that PTFE, you shouldn't be getting any leaks. You don't want to go too hard, otherwise you'll run into some issues. But you can see that this one was clearly designed so the entire valve would match up. So if I wanted to take this whole thing off, I could put a long extension socket on it and all of it will come off together. But this one is a serviced and should be leak-free valve. Now, whenever I go to install this on a machine, you would end up putting a crush washer down here. So one is done. This one is going to be officially retired. And so I'm going to just do this one and it's just going to stay in the parts drawer forever. This one came off of a really, really old machine. And it's got the stainless steel head on it. So once again, it's all been neutralized. This one was in quite bad shape. The O-ring was, it almost felt like it was epoxied onto this pin, but it's still good just to show, because this is a very common style of vacuum breaker valve. So just as a reminder, this one has a little C-clamp that goes on top, and we need our O-ring. And actually, I don't think I have an O-ring for this. Let me grab one out real quick. Again, you don't want this to be a tight fit. You want it to be clearly snug, but easy to remove and loosen up. So yeah, now we've got what should be a good seal on this top. And I personally don't enjoy putting on these C-clamps, but a really, really nice pair of needle nose pliers can make that job quite a bit easier, because you're going to end up losing them if you're not using a good pair of pliers. But with a good pair of pliers, it can make the reinstallation quite easy. And once again, you would just take a little bit of that PTFE tape again. Now, this one isn't very height sensitive, so if you wanted to throw a crush washer on it. I don't think you would actually hurt anything, but I just prefer to use PTFE tape on all the tops of these valves just to keep things simple. And if you ever start to thread this in and it gives way too much resistance, you could be cross-threading, so stop, readjust. Whenever you take your valve apart, just note whatever orientation or build they had. So if it had a crush washer here, make sure you replace it with the crush washer. And if they had PTFE, make sure you clean those threads and redo the PTFE on it. So that's number 2 down. As you can see, this is not necessarily a hard job. Honestly, the hard job sometimes is just getting it off of the machine, which I'm sure I'll make videos on full scale rebuilds and teardowns and stuff like that into the future. So we should be nice and neutralized. Now this pin did have quite a lot of buildup on it. I'm usually not super concerned about buildup on the pins. As long as you have a fairly clean surface down here, then you should be good. When in doubt though, if your pin is looking terrible and your descaling solution isn't cleaning it up very well, you can do an overnight soak, or you can also replace pins if needed. Both are feasible and frankly good options. Pins are not super expensive, but this whole thing is about repairing it. Just making sure that you've got clean everything inside, and it appears that we do, because one kind of leak you can get on these is if you don't properly seal down that PTFE, you can end up getting a leak around the sides of it and still have a drip or leak problem. Let's put this back together. O-ring over here on the side, and I already know this one's. Put the PTFE seal over, and again, I'm fairly certain this is PTFE. I will correct it if I have the wrong material type. So for this one, you needed 1 crush washer on this base here, and then that's going to go all the way down. Now I have perpetually struggled with this valve on the orientation. Usually it's supposed to be facing parallel to each other, but it always ends up being a little bit off. I'm hopeful that a little extra PTFE tape will help to alleviate that problem, but we're going to go ahead and give this crush washer a nice little snug. Again, I know it's a crush washer and you are crushing it, but don't kill it. Just nice and snug usually does the job, especially since we have cleaned everything up here. And if you put it on and you realize you're getting a leak, just snug it up a little more. Adding our tape. And I'm sure someone's going to comment saying I use too much or too little of this tape. I don't actually have a science behind it. I just don't want it to leak. And they don't. Once again, I like to have it kind of favoring the base of the valve so it can help act as almost a artificial O-ring. And last step is just to screw this on. And it is very, very tight as it is. Because of the quantity of the PTFE, the PTFE is making this seal. So I'm actually not going to screw it any further. It's going to stay in the proper orientation, and we shouldn't get any leaks, because the whole magic behind PTFE tape is it becomes the new sealant for the threads, especially where the valve isn't going into tapered threads. The PTFE is needed to make that seal, and is the seal. It's not necessarily the contact with the bottom here. So you want to get it as far down and as tight as possible without over tightening and having to back off, and then leave it there. And that is the La Marzocco valve service. Look at that. We have 3 serviced valves here, all pretty simple. I do recommend you do a descale bath if they're ever looking a little funky. And it's also just good process to do that in general. These little deli containers are awesome to have on hand. I have a stack of 50 of them. And if they break, they break. Usually they don't. And you can reuse them, but they're very nice because you can also put lids on, especially if you're doing anything overnight. And they're about the perfect size. These are 16-ounce containers. If you have been chasing that mystery leak or hearing a constant hissing or whatever that is, usually this is your culprit. This is the second most serviced thing I have on espresso machines, and the first most serviced thing inside the espresso machine, outside of maybe you would say a high limit switch, but I'm not quite counting that. They're cheap, they're common, they're very easy to overlook, and people make a bigger deal out of their design and complexity than they should. It's just a pin with an O-ring making a seal. So if you know how to put an O-ring on a pin, you're going to be fine. And if you want to learn more about Espresso Tech parts like this and servicing, be sure to check out the other videos like the one I'm linking here.